All right, let's talk a little about punctuation, especially punctuation in quotation marks and titles. First of all, when it comes to quotation marks, I recommend using double quotation marks all the time. Even if you're just quoting a word, like even putting what's called scare quotes around a word, kind of like people do air quotes. If you're saying love, then you would put double quotes around it, okay? In general, always use double quotes. When does one use single quotes? They only use single quotes when it's a quote within a quote. So if you're quoting someone who quotes someone, then you would put double quotes around the outside and then single quotes around the inside quote. So that's when you use single quotes. Otherwise, a single quote is an apostrophe. So and apostrophes denote possession. So in general, don't use single quotes. All right? So second, if you are citing something, then the punctuation, the period, goes outside the citation. And the citation could be a name and date in parentheses, or it could be a number in brackets if you're following ASME or IEEE style. So for those citations, it would be the number in brackets and then the period. Okay? Now, a couple other things about punctuation in specifically titles and quotation marks. So titles, a larger work, so something that's published by itself, would be in italics. Okay, that's the general format now. Because we use computers, you can use italics, not underline. So you would put the title of a book, a novel, or a journal, okay, the title of the journal itself would be in italics. An article in that journal, or a story or poem in that book, would be in quotation marks. Okay? So, if you are introducing a quote, you learned that you should put a comma before a quote that you introduce, right? And you learn this because of dialogue. What you're really talking about is dialogue. That when you say, he said, comma, and then the dialogue that the person writes. And we think of that as a quote. But that's not the same as quoting in an academic paper. In an academic paper, when one quotes, it's normally woven into their writing. So if you were going to quote in a journal article and you said, according to Dobson, comma, and then quotation, all right, that comma that you put before that quote is not there because it's dialogue. It's because you've got an introductory phrase, according to Dobson. So if you wanted to quote something and weave it into the sentence itself and says, Dobson says that people are, quote, 5 times more likely to do X, Y, or Z, then you wouldn't put any punctuation before that quote. It's just a part of the sentence. All you do is put the quotation marks. Okay, so you don't have to have punctuation before a quote. Now, you are allowed to add commas and periods to quotes. So if you had a quote or even a title that ends a sentence and you need to put a period at the end of that sentence, then you would put it inside the quotation marks. And this is assuming you don't cite it. If you cite it, then it would go after the citation, as I already said. But if you are just saying that I reviewed the TED Talk called Inside the Mind of a Master Procrastinator, that would be in quotes, okay? The TED Talk would be in quotes, but the period would go inside the quotation marks, not outside. The only exception to this rule is if you were changing something from a statement to a question. So if I was going to ask in writing, did you watch, quote, Inside the Mind of a Master Procrastinator, end quote. You see how I turned that into a question? And so I need a question mark at the end of that title. I can't put that inside the quotation marks. I could put a period, but then it wouldn't be a question. So I would put quotation marks, question mark. All right? That's really the only reason you put punctuation outside quotation marks, is when you are changing something from a statement to a question or vice versa. Okay? Otherwise, you can add commas inside quotation marks or titles. You can add periods inside quotation marks and titles because they don't change the meaning. But if you change the meaning, then it needs to go outside. All right? I think that's it. Good luck.